I really like watching Bobby Flay get beat on Beat Bobby Flay because I think he's a villain.
Ooh. I was going to go like my all-time favorite show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I do like Law and Order SVU, although like one of the things, like when I'm done speaking, I just want to like zone out in front of the TV. I do a lot of Law and Order, but I've started to really like listen to how problematic they were before they like somehow, there must have been a training or something. But like, I watched it last night on the train, and the guy was like, I need you to dress more professional tomorrow, meaning you need to wear a skirt. And I was like, ew. So now I just watch the beginning episodes and I'm like, ew, this is so gross. I hate it. Yeah. But I love watching Bobby Flay get beat because he cheated on the woman from Law and Order SVU, and so I have a vendetta against him.
Dang, I like this full circle story.
Yeah.
To like if it had something with Law and Order. It's kind of wild. The problematic shows, sometimes I rewatch The Office and I'm just like, ooh, we cannot say that today.
Correct.
And that's like less than 10 years old. 10 or maybe 15.
But that means like in 10 years from now, we're going to watch things and be like, ooh, I can't imagine like what we're going to think of watching like all of the reality shows 10 years from now, like Too Hot to Handle.
Love that one.
Love is Blind.
Love that one.
Like what we're all going to say when we rewatch those in a decade. Like, ooh.
Well, I hope by that point they found new ways to date people, new ways to torture people and give them trauma. Like, let's date this through a wall.
I mean, to be fair, Too Hot to Handle comes back this week, and I'm like not upset about it.
It's already bookmarked. That Netflix functionality where you can bookmark the shows that you was like bookmark now.
Excited.
Watch that one. We just recently watched it with a bunch of coworkers. Actually, we were all hanging out watching that, and I was like, "This is." Everyone had thoughts, and I was like, "Well, welcome to Hot to Handle." Oh my God, I know. Usually people trickle in up until like 2 minutes after. So I like to give people 2 minutes and I like to chat with people and see what their favorite TV shows are.
Well, this was my first time. This season was my first season of Love is Blind. And I really hated every single person. Every single person.
Like, you haven't even seen the first season? There's so much success.
I haven't seen the first season. All I know is that every person in this season had no redeemable qualities except for maybe Alexa.
Yeah. Did you think it was odd that all the men were much younger too, and the women were older and like actually ready for marriage?
I feel like all of the men were like would hate crime me at a bar in Dallas. Like they would all call me the N-word. That's the vibe I got from those men. Mm.
You are in Texas, so
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It is a possibility, but like some people, you like question it. There was no question, especially the girl who was like, I'm a ballerina. The guy she is with, absolutely not. Nope.
I thought the internet was really interesting about him because all of them thought he was abusive. And everyone on the internet is like, he is not. The way he responded to a lot of things is like really bad. And I thought it was just like interesting watching society comment on the people in reality TV and be able to read them so well. I mean, I kind of was like, he was kind of scary to me when he started yelling at her. I was like, I would not react well if a man yelled at me like that. I'd be like, no. Yeah.
And I think the thing is like, he let his mask slip only so far because he knows he's being filmed. What is he like when the camera's not on?
Yeah.
Not great. So.
Any Love is Blind fans here? Drop a note in the chat. I love that. It's pretty wild. We can dive in like one more minute.
I love White Lotus, except I just watched a TikTok that was like talking about all these like Easter eggs in it. And now I feel like I have to go back and watch the whole season because I feel like I've actually missed some stuff that were like subplots. So we're thinking about like rewatching it this weekend.
I missed a major Easter egg in last Sunday's episode. The picture. I'm not going to say anything more than that.
Oh my God, I missed that too.
And then my husband told me, and then I was like watching all the TikToks, and I was like, oh my God, I missed a major Easter egg in the show.
I missed that too, and I found that out from TikTok.
Yeah, damn, TikTok's really getting all of us.
I mean, I got to stay off TikTok until I've watched my shows. Otherwise, I'm just going to ruin all my shows for myself.
That's how I ruined Love is Blind for me. Then I had to start in. Okay, we have some stuff going in the chat. Let me turn this music off, and then we can actually dive in. I'm so excited. Hopefully everyone got to share their favorite TV shows. We'll see more folks trickle in through the rest of the time. But real quick, today we have Madison Butler joining us. I'm so honored that she agreed. We had someone ask for her to join us. And so I went and I asked her and she said yes. And I'm eternally grateful. So today is December 7th. I can't believe it's so close to the holidays. I'm getting anxious just thinking about it. But welcome, Madison. We'll get to a slide where you'll introduce yourself in a second. But real quick, we're going to do the same thing we do every time we do one of these, except this session's a little bit different. It's more of a fireside chat vibe. I'm going to ask Madison some questions. I hope all of you will submit some questions for her as well. So you'll meet Madison in a second, and then we'll do live QA, and then we'll wrap with what's next. Real quick, I have to thank my two amazing sponsors, Questus and Newsstand. Without them, I wouldn't get to do these things. Like I get to say whatever I want and do whatever I want because they believe in me and the power of this platform. So I'm pretty excited about that. Thank you, Questus and Newsstand. Before we dive in, a few things, notes I always have. Chat will be recorded. Oh, sorry, this will be recorded. Chat will be distracting. We don't actually have a notes document this time because it's more of a fireside chat, but I forgot to take that off the slideshow. Apologies. Just a heads up, the chat is very distracting. We usually like to talk a lot. So if you don't like it, please minimize it now. And now you get to meet Madison. Madison, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself to the group for those who don't know you? Impossible.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madison. My pronouns are she, her. Most of the world calls me Maddie, except for my mother and my resume. So if you don't know me, I am also known as the blue-haired unicorn. I spend a great deal of time talking about psychological safety and deconstructing oppressive systems within our organizations. I'm also a chief people officer, so HR is really my jam, and I get to marry the two loves of my life, which is people and making the world a better place for them. Outside of that, I have 5 dogs, 2 partners, and my house is very full.
5 dogs?
What kind of dogs? Okay. So I have Dolly is a Catahoula. She's my original. She'll be 8 in January. Bobby is what they call a pot cake. And he's a Caribbean dog who I straight up found while I was on vacation in Belize and brought him home with me. I have Potato, who is some kind of shepherd mix. She's like 105 pounds. I found her. I have Darby, who I also found, who is like a pit bull mix, except she's very small and it's very confusing. She's got a very odd body. And then last but not least, I have my really cute, but very not bright troublemaker, who is Finn. Finn is a Weimaraner. He is also epileptic. And if you know anything about Weimaraners, they're fairly big dogs. And like Darby, weird body, never grew, giant feet, very short, very confusing, runs into walls, which is not great for anyone who is epileptic. So and I have a cat named Tom Noodle.
Wow. I would love a pic someday of like all the dogs, because I don't know any dog breeds. And so you just said all of those. And I was like, I only know poodles. I'm not a dog person. I also love that you rescued all these dogs. I heard that's like actually really hard to do when you're abroad, to bring the dog back.
Yeah, it's a sidebar and a really great like party story, but yes. So I found him. I knew I wanted to keep him because he was just like, he played me. He pretended he couldn't walk, which like he absolutely can walk, might I add. So I had to find him a foster, and like 2 days before he was to come to America, the foster called me and was like, oh my God, I lost the dog. Then she called me back, and I'm at work because this is like before remote work. And I'm sobbing at work, which is great. Then she calls me back and she's like, oh my God, the dog died. He got hit by a car. I buried him. I'm so sorry. I'll mail you his collar. And now I'm really sobbing at work. And then 2 days later, she was like, just kidding. He was actually dog napped and he's being held for ransom. And if you pay the ransom, they'll give you the dog back. So I paid the ransom and I got the dog back.
That is the wildest story I've ever heard.
It was a lot of me crying at work, to be quite honest.
The ransom piece of this I've actually heard is very common.
And it wasn't a whole lot of money. It was like $300 US. And I was like, okay, take my money. Just give me the dog.
Just give me the dog. That's not dead now. Wow. Okay. That's for like a whole nother session called The Most Dramatic Story I've Ever Heard when it comes to rescuing animals. I definitely want to hear more. And then I'm Hibba. You all have met me before. Hopefully, if you haven't, and this is your first time here, welcome. I'm the Chief People Officer over at Workweek and also the creator of a newsletter called I Hate It Here, which is all about workplace cultures, why they suck and how to make them better. So diving in, we're going to do a quick poll. Everyone grab your phone. I always grab my phone because I just love to see what people are doing. And then I'll share my screen real quick. Quick poll on, let's see if this works. I just wanted to ask a question about, oh, no, my poll's not active. Give me 1 second. Love a good poll moment. Okay, now my poll is active. It's a simple yes, no. It's, do you feel your company is committed to DEI? I asked this question because amongst all the great work Maddie does, a lot of the conversation that we have on LinkedIn is a lot about DEI, how our companies feel and what they're doing. And so pulse check on how people are feeling. So fun little active poll. Also, if you've never used Slido before, you can also submit live questions that are probably going to come up as we start our conversation. This is really interesting. Okay, answers are trickling in. Can I just say I'm surprised? I really thought more people would say no.
I'd only be surprised if the demographics of this call were predominantly Black women.
Love that. Thank you for that nugget.
Yeah. I'm really cynical and really honest, so I don't apologize in advance, but just as an FYI.
The only thing I apologize for is that occasionally I will use curse words on this call. So if you have children listening, please ask them to leave the room because I will probably say fuck a dozen times. Okay, yeah, this is wild. So I'm going to go back to just me and Maddie. If you were pinned, so you can just see us. I asked, I said, I'm surprised by that. And you said you would be surprised if the demographics were different. How do you actually know if a company is committed to DEI?
So I think one of the things for me is being committed to DEI also has to be being committed to accountability. And I find that a lot of people want to do the nice pieces of the work. They want to talk about it. They want to have a training. They want to bring me in to speak. They want to have shirts for Juneteenth, maybe a pizza party. But when it comes to holding Joe Bob in sales accountable because he's a racist or he's a homophobe or he's a transphobe, we typically tend to stop short. Accountability typically has limits, and those limits usually reach about the ends that someone is performing or producing for an organization. Yeah. People are happy to hold underperformers accountable because it's a great way to manage them out. However, when it's the CMO, the CPO, the head of revenue, typically those get to fly under the radar, especially if they are a high performer or a high producer. I recently had a client that said to me, they were like, we have one person on the leadership team. They don't really believe in DEI, but they're a great manager. And I was like, no, they're not. I was like, you can tell me they're a great performer. They produce very well, but they cannot manage people well if they inherently do not care about their livelihood outside of this organization. And their livelihood in this organization greatly depends on their commitment to this work. And so I think oftentimes we think we're committed because we're willing to talk about it or we're willing to have a DEI committee. Yeah. But at the end of this day, if you are not removing the harmful people from your organization, then you can't tell me you're committed, because then what you're actually doing is asking marginalized people to sit and play nice with their abusers. Because what this is, what racism is, what transphobia is, what homophobia is, what xenophobia is abuse. It's trauma. And if you do not hold people who perpetuate that behavior in your organization accountable, then guess what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to sit nicely and send my little Slacks and smile and sit in meetings with people who intentionally cause harm to me and people who look like me.
Yeah. The chat is just blowing up, people saying, yes, agreed. I love that. I think the accountability piece is really interesting though, other than firing the person. Is there any other means of accountability? Because I feel like people are so afraid to fire those people, those high performers, where I think that the narrative should be just fire them if they're bad people. But are there any other ways to hold someone accountable?
No. And so my whole thing in 2020 was fire racist 2020 was the hashtag I used. Because here's the thing, it is not my job as a CPO, as a DEI facilitator to teach you how to be a good person. These are resources that are readily available to you. Google is readily available at your fingertips. If you do not know in 2022, as a fully matured, full frontal lobe having adult, that you have to be minimum a nice person at work, then I cannot help you. And I think one of the things that people always tell me is oh my God, why do you want to get racists fired? Instead of educating them. This is where people, I think, struggle. And this is where I'll be really honest. There are some people who do not want to do this. I can provide them all the education, all of the resources, and they still don't want to do this. What better lesson than learning to not do this by being held accountable with your job? Yeah. Because there are people who don't want to do this work because they recognize that the system benefits them. The system upholds their place in society. And so I'm not a big believer in like, let's softly teach you, because all you're teaching them is to work the system better. You're not teaching them to be a better person, because we cannot teach that. They have to want that. And 90 times out of 100, if they're being a racist at work, they know they shouldn't be a racist at work. Like this is not new. It's an active choice they're making.
Yeah. Oh God, the chat is all saying like, you're my hero, 100%. Everyone very much agrees. I think the interesting thing is like all of us agree, and we're in HR, like the majority of this audience is HR people, but it still doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so that like, and I think it takes the buy-in of obviously like your founders, whoever's running your company to make it, but what else do you think it requires? Because we all believe it clearly, but it still doesn't happen. And I hear stories left and right, like so-and-so said this, or my CRO said just between us girls, which is like kind of offensive because I'm a grown woman, not a girl, that type of stuff. Like, what do you think is stopping us from getting there?
So I think part of it is, one, the fact that we all write these policies, which are like a no tolerance policy. And then we never, ever use them. And I do think it's about having buy-in, but it's also about creating an organization that feels safe to say when something happens to you. The majority of people do not report when they face harassment. We know that, especially when it is someone who holds a marginalized identity. So if we don't give them the space to speak up, then we can't be better. And I think until we live in a world where it's safer to be the person who reports abuse versus the person who is the abuser, then this will stay the same. Because as of right now, it is so much safer to be the racist than to be the Black person speaking about racism.
Yeah. Oh, that's what do you think we as HR professionals can do to create a system where people feel comfortable speaking up against the oppressors or the people at their company who are treating them badly?
So I think a part of it is, as people in HR and people in people, whatever you call yourself, we have to be able to willingly, intentionally recognize where, as an industry, we have been the gatekeeper of this. For a very long time, HR has been the protector of the business and not the protector of people. And we have to be willing to acknowledge where that has caused a ton of harm, a ton of mistrust in who we are as individuals. And it may not be us, but we all know what people think about HR. We're like organizational police, essentially. Yes. So you know that you walk into a room and everyone like gets quiet. That's not because they don't like you as a person. It's because people have learned to not trust us. Because even when we say you can trust us, there's also, I think, this harder part that we can't not do. Like, we have to terminate people. That's part of it. And people feel like it's hush hush. I come in every day and I'm like, bippity boppity boop, who can I fire today? And that's not the actuality, but that is how it is perceived, because obviously we're also not coming in and announcing a termination or why it's happening or what happened and what the investigation looked like. So there has to be some kind of happy medium where you build trust and accountability with your teams and organizations. But a giant piece of that is understanding that, like, HR, specifically white women, have been the gatekeeper of this harm, of this trauma, of this abuse, and have been really good at sweeping it under the rug to protect the asses of white men.
I just posted an article about that in my newsletter last week about how white women need to do better. I think it's really interesting, like looking at the demographic data of like who votes for what political candidate and what that means for all the rest of us. Someone just wrote in the comment, they want to maintain the status quo just as much.
And even if they don't realize they're doing it, I think, so I don't know if any of you are familiar with Saira Rao and Regina Jackson. They just came out with this great book.
Yep.
But the documentary, if you haven't watched it, which is called Deconstructing Karen, is really eye-opening, just about how white women want to maintain the status quo and they don't even recognize they're doing it. You and I just talked about this. Like, I'm on a plane and I never want to be talked to. But of course, I was flying home this Saturday and I had on my big headphones, and I'm, my like biggest like joy in life is sitting in first class and like making eye contact with the white men who are uncomfortable with it as they walk by. But so I'm in, my little seat, and this woman next to me, she's got to be like 70, taps on my headphones and was like, and so she wanted to really have a 2.5 hour conversation about race. And I was like, all righty, 7 a.m., let's do it. But one of the things she asked me, and she was like clearly a liberal white woman who believed in racial equality and equity. She was like, well, why do Black people have to have like Black ERGs and Black clubs and like things if you want to be included? And I could tell that, like, even though this is something she inherently believed in, she was still really struggling. And I think it takes a lot to even understand that. And she probably doesn't even still see it. And I gave her the answer, and I hope that the answer for her takes her into better conversations in the future. But I think even watching the documentary Deconstructing Karen, like I felt myself getting angry because all of these women thought they were woke and doing the right thing. And in actuality, a lot of what they were perpetuating was really harmful stereotyping.
What was the response you gave her about why there needs to be
So, I actually used Black Speakers Collection as the example. I was like, I created Black Speakers Collection because I wanted a place to build community where I didn't have to be questioned as to why. So often when Black creators, anyone has to speak about their experiences, we are questioned about, well, is that really what happened? Are you just reading into it? Beep it up, doop doop doop. And I just wanted a space where Black speakers could talk about their experiences without having to do all of that, without having to basically prove their experiences, prove the racism, prove their trauma. I wanted just a space where we could exist in community and talk to one another. And I shit you not, this woman said, oh my God, so it's like when I join a club. And I was like, yes, it's like when you join a club because you have common interests. Woohoo, I'm glad we got to the point. And so I think that, and that was a big piece. I could like see the light bulb go off for her.
Yeah.
And so I think, it is really hard, especially when we're living in this world where everyone thinks they are the wokest or the best because they're a liberal white woman, which I feel like is a really good chunk of HR today, because they think they know what's right. They think they get it because they have a Black husband, a Black daughter, a Black best friend, a Black coworker, whatever it is. However, you are not a marginalized person by osmosis. You are not a marginalized person by being in proximity with us. And I find a lot of white women often use their own marginalization to further marginalize others, and they don't even recognize that they're doing it.
How do they do that? Can you share with everyone how you've seen them do that?
Yeah, so let's think Amy Cooper right now. Amy Cooper used her position as a white woman, played the damsel in distress card very well, and called the police on a Black man, knowing full and well what that could result in. And when she got here, the first thing she said was, I'm not a racist. I'm in my DEI committee. I have Black friends, blah, 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 blah. And used the fact that she is a white woman and being a woman is a marginalized identity. But at the end of the day, she is still a white woman. So she knew people would rush to her rescue, even if it was at the detriment to that Black man who was literally just watching birds.
He was just watching birds. I find that so wild.
We see that played out in corporate America over and over and over in different terms. And it could be that I called you out on you touching my hair, but now all of a sudden I'm the aggressor because I said, don't touch me. And you went to HR and you cried about it. White women use their tears when it benefits them regularly, and HR is not very different, unfortunately.
So if the majority, let's say the majority of HR people are white women, how can we be better allies? How can they be better allies? Like, I want that to change. I think there are a lot of people here who want that to change as well. How can they be better allies?
So I think part of it is like, let's redefine how we look at the word allyship. I think a lot of people, so I actually had someone message me in my DMs last week. And so if you follow me on LinkedIn, you notice that instead of writing white, I write YT a lot. And that is literally just to get around content moderation so I don't get my little ass thrown off the platform. But this woman slid in my DMs and she said, hey, Madison, like basically long time listener, first time caller kind of stuff. And was like, but I'm an ally. And literally followed it up with but, and was like, but I couldn't come to support your post today because I noticed you used YT in your post and I Googled it and it told me it was a slur for white people. And I was like, and then she went on to say, but if there's anything I can do to be a better ally, you let me know. But remember, some of us white people are allies. We're not all bad. And I was like, oh my God. You calling yourself an ally is not the same as being an ally. Yeah. Part of being an ally is letting yourself be uncomfortable when I speak, when other Black creators speak, when queer creators speak, because so much of this should be uncomfortable. It shouldn't be like a warm conversation. It shouldn't be like a fuzzy, warm hug. Like these conversations should be hard. They should make you want to essentially get up and run away from me. That's what I'm looking for. I want you to like have the urge to run away from me and then you don't.
Would never.
And so for me, so much of allyship today has been like made popular to be like something you put in your bio, something you put on your resume, something you do because you join your DEI committee and you actually use it as a stepping stool in your career rather than what it actually is. It is not a nice, fun describer. It is a verb. It is work.
Yeah.
And for me, that is so much of it. And the hardest part of this work is holding yourself accountable. I think so much of the world would be in a better place if we were willing to have hard conversations with ourselves in the mirror rather than just with those around us.
Yeah.
It took me years and years and years to unpack my own anti-Blackness with myself because it sucks. It's hard. And to be fair, it hurts. It hurts to understand that everything you've ever thought and done was wrong. Because not only that, I fundamentally believe the majority of us want to be good people. We want to be good friends. We want to be good partners. We want to be good coworkers. And we're really taught to believe that there's like this good and bad binary. Either you're a good person, you're a bad person. There's no gray area. So if you start examining those things, like where everything may have gone awry, you really start to have to examine where you've caused harm to people individually, where you've caused harm to people as a group. And now you have to start thinking like, oh my God, am I a bad person? When in actuality, the reality of this is good people cause harm every day. And even when you are fully committed to this work, you will still cause harm. Yep. It's like you and I were talking about before this. We'll look back at these TV shows 10 years from now and be like, oh my God, I cannot believe you said that. You're going to say the same thing about yourself. You're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that, posted that, wore that, whatever.
Believed that. Yeah.
So much of this work is being able to hold yourself accountable and be like, oh my God, that thing I said was wrong. How can I be better? Versus letting your ego run the show. Because if your ego ran the show, then you fall on the defensive and then you start to be in the camp of, are you just reading into it? I didn't mean it like that. You know, I'm not like that. So on and so forth forever. Yeah. And, for me, that feels like the best part of allyship is when you can coach yourself to be better. Because how can I expect you to coach grandpa at the Christmas table for being a racist if you can't have that conversation with yourself where you can say, hey, this thing grandpa taught me was wrong and it was racist and it was harmful.
Yeah.
So for me, that really is the biggest part outside of believe people's experiences without questioning them because you haven't had the same experience. And that one's really hard, especially when that experience is with someone you trust. I come to you and I say, hey, I had a really bad experience with your partner and you've never had that experience. Oftentimes you're going to fall on the defense of that person close to you instead of listening to the person who is speaking to you about their experiences, if that makes sense.
And it definitely does. But I think the trickier part too, for a lot of us that are in people ops is like, how do we navigate all the relationships we have as like heads of people or HR, like managers, employees, leadership, and still look them in the eye and say, like, you did something wrong. Like you did something wrong. You need to do the work. I think that's like, it feels sad to say, but I think a lot of people take the easy way out and know something is wrong, but don't want to do the work to make it better.
And I think the other piece is, and like humans really love an end of project. We love a light at the end of the tunnel. And this doesn't exist for this work because once you commit to doing it, you have to do it forever, every day until the end of time. 24 hours a day, not just your 8 hours at work. And people really hate that because it's also something you can't perfect. Where if I play chess for a really long time, at some point I'm going to get really good at it.
The 10,000 hours thing. Yeah.
You do this forever and you're still not going to be perfect at it. That's why, I never position myself as an expert in anything because how can I be an expert if I'm also a forever learner? If I'm sometimes going to get it wrong. And people really struggle with that. I think it's, even for me, like when I moved back to the East Coast, the first thing I did before I knew I needed a new knee was bought soccer cleats because I was like, oh, I'm going to get back into it now that I'm back home. And having a previous knee reconstruction, every time I touch the ball, it's like my brain knows what to do, but my knee does not operate with it. And for me, that was really hard to know that I was good at something and couldn't perform. The thing that kept me off the field mostly was like the embarrassment of failing, not my love of the game. And I think we do that similarly in this is like, it is so easy to be like, well, I don't want to fail, so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And as heads of people, we owe it to our teams to help coach them and make them better when they are messing up, when they are failing, even if it's something that they don't understand or recognize, because not all racism is like outward, like blatant racism or homophobia. Sometimes it's something that is like so deep-seated and microaggressive that they don't recognize it's there. And so I would hope that as someone who wants to be better, you want people to call you on that because you want to be better.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally believe it is part of our role to be able to have those candid conversations because we are one of the only people in the organization that really can without it being I don't know, tied to their boss necessarily or what have you. It allows us to have very candid conversations in a way that is truthful and honest, and maybe a little less stressful than having it with their direct manager.
It's interesting because I said this last week on HR Therapy, where we talked about being a manager. I said, if you don't like conflict, this is not the right job for you. Yep. Like, we have to be the advocates for everybody and look someone in the eye and say, like, that is a thing that you did that was wrong, and here's why. And so, like, I think that a lot of people end up in HR because they like people. Like, I don't think anyone here would say that. I think all of us are like, people are awful. But what they don't realize is with that comes all the complicated pieces of the fact that humans have like deep-seated beliefs and thoughts, and we have to look them in the face and help them deconstruct those. Yep. I have another question for you. Someone wrote in, often DEI is put on HR to lead, but all three require everyone. How do we call in people who are virtue signaling as allies, but unwilling to do the work?
And so that's something I say all the time. This is not an HR problem. It's not a TA problem. It's not a talent brand problem. At the end of the day, this work has to come from the top down to every single person, because this is every person, everyday work.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that your poll said their people's companies were committed to DEI, because if it's not an everyday, every person thing, then your company is not committed to DEI, because it goes back to like the same conversation. Is there any other option than firing people? If people are rowing in the wrong direction, you're never going to be able to do the work. So as long as you have people who say they don't care about this work, they don't want to do this work, they want to come in and just do their job every day, then you can't be committed to it, because you are literally going to be like swimming upstream against people who are fighting against you.
Yeah.
I think part of it is being really honest, not only as an organization about what you inherently believe in, that also means being really honest when you interview people. Like, here are the things we believe in, here's how we operate, here's our value set, and not like the value set that you pull off Google. So many companies have such shitty values, like Favor in Austin on their wall, it literally says get shit done, which I inherently know that I came to work to do things. I don't think you have to remind me. So I would encourage companies to make your value set what you actually believe in, what actually motivates people to be here every day. And I guarantee you it is not get shit done. No one comes to work because they want to get shit done. I promise. But what are the things that really move your organization forward? And the things that if people can't embody these things, they're not going to enjoy their time here. Because those are the things we should be able to talk about in interviews, because I want people to opt out when this is not the right fit. I'm so honest when I interview. Like, I want to give you the most clear vision of our organization so you can make the best decision for you, your family, your life.
Yeah.
And that means if we're a company that very truthfully says Black Lives Matter, I should be telling you that, because if you are learning it at 6 months and you're like, well, I don't believe that, now you feel othered. When this didn't, and now you're also working against what we're working for, neither of us are happy. When I could have been honest before you ever got here, instead of trying to find a way to now manage you out.
Yeah. It's interesting because while you were talking about that, I was just thinking to myself, can any company truly be committed to DEI? Like, at a massive scale level, like that every single person cares about it. Knowing our society and like how our states are split and what people believe in, I'm just like, is it really possible?
No. I mean, I guess in a magical world, maybe if you have a small company, because there are tons of companies people can go work at if they don't care about DEI. I promise there is no shortage of companies that love racists.
Where's that list? Should we be circulating that for some people? Like,
just like go hang out in my comment section. Some guy got like fired for being, he was like, I'm rarely shocked. But his comment even left me like, sir. And he worked at BMW in Houston, Texas, of course. And I had been like, hey, like, on top of you being a racist, like, I drive the product you sell. Like, a 2022 brand new, like, not a great look. His company put out this big statement that they fired him. They actually just moved him to another dealership. So like there are plenty of companies that are like ready to employ the racists.
It's just fascinating. Yeah. I read this. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
If you really start to like unpack it all, I would even say, can you be committed to DEI while you participate in capitalism?
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to be thinking about that one for a while, Maddie.
And so, I think there's a really great concept. I don't know if you follow I want to say it's called like zebra, less, more zebras, less unicorns or whatever. And their whole concept is like, as a unicorn company, you could be committed to like making the world a better place while you do it. Versus like unicorns, like literally don't care. They want their $1 billion valuation. They don't care who they step on their way there. Now I believe there are ways that you can operate in capitalism that are better, but at the end of the day, like we're operating in a system that is based in white supremacy.
I'm going to think about this for like the rest of the day. Like
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, you saying that, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I agree. But then I'm like, wait, I like need to now go read more about this and be more educated, because that's such a good point that I never considered the system that we were in upholding values that would make it impossible to be committed to DEI.
But I mean, even if you zoom out further, and I think one of the things that like frustrates me and gives me like a little bit of existential dread is like, we're essentially forced. Like there's nothing you can do about operating in capitalism. You have to. But then if you think about, okay, so I'm not going to hide all my money in my mattress. I have to work in the banking system. Banking system, inherently racist.
Yes.
I have to use my Visa, my MasterCard, my Amex. Where are their super PAC money going? Places that are bad.
Yeah.
Like, the more you zoom out, the worse it gets. There's actually a pretty good series on Netflix called Dirty Money. And it's all like 30-minute episodes about like where capitalism is yucky and dirty in the American financial system. And I just think it's really interesting. Like the first one is about Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo has been a bad bank from the jump. Yeah. And like, there's nothing people can do about it. Like finance and banking are inherently racist, followed by real estate. And what are those two? Married.
Yeah. Ooh, this probably explains why I didn't like fintech so much. That makes sense.
I hated real estate tech. I hated it.
I worked in that too. Hated it as well.
And like we had someone on the customer success team who he would get calls all the time, and he was Jewish, and people would be like, I want to talk to an American. And they'd be like, okay, we'll put you on the phone with someone else. Like they would have this poor kid who was like 21 be like, I'm so sorry, let me find you someone better. And we had another girl who was named Chanel, but she was a white Chanel. And they made her put a picture next to her name so that clients would know that she was not a Black Chanel. And so like all of this seeps into tech. And right now the wealth gap for Black Americans is wider than it was in the 1950s. And I would bet if we peeled the data back, so much of it is because of big tech.
Yeah. Ooh, I can't wait for that piece that you put out. That's some juicy content. The article that I read that was really interesting was, the summer of 2020, very, very intense time for a lot of people who are trying to do the DEI work, and also just what was happening in the world and how we all felt about it. And all these companies put out these like massive big statements, like, we're committed to DEI, we're going to fix everything, right? And now they've done the research, and 3 years later, nothing has changed. Why do you think that is?
So I think we're in this really weird time where people have learned that like being woke is actually just good PR. The data shows that Gen Z and millennials predominantly spend their money with companies who they believe in their value set. Yeah. And so if you're a company who says we don't, you're hurting your own bottom line. So companies realize that they can pay for PR. They can pay for a good publicist. They can put up their little black square. The thing that I think bothered me so much is it's also a giant smoke signal, because you're saying you care about this group of marginalized people, but if you run the data or even like exit surveys, the majority of people who are leaving your organization are also those same people, because you're traumatizing them. Mm-hmm. And so to say that you care about those people outside of your organization but not inside of your organization is so wildly harmful. And companies just did not care. They knew they had to say something. They knew they could flex their donation dollars, which I think the other part that's missing is like when people look, they were like, oh, $100,000, like that's a lot of money, because it is a lot of money. But $100,000 to $100 billion company is like me buying Subway or McDonald's. Like it's no money to them. It's money that bought them PR. It's money that bought them good vibes, and essentially probably converted into sales in some way. And so I think a lot of people, to be honest, capitalized on Black pain and trauma as a PR, as a PR stunt, more than anything else. The amount of companies that have actually changed the way that they work or changed the livelihoods of the marginalized people within their organization the numbers are dismal compared to the ones who like put out a statement or like donated some money and then talked about how much they donated, because that is definitely what you do when you care
That's
a lot
right.
about people. You talk
Huge red
about how much you spend. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when people run into an unhoused person and they offer them food, but then they film the whole interaction and it makes you feel very yucky. That is what this felt like to me, but on a grand universal scale.
Yeah. I didn't even know people did that. No.
Yeah, it's really yucky. It was like a whole thing on TikTok at like pre-COVID. That was like really big. And I was like, and I mean, people still do it. Like they'll go up to people and be like, do you want this $10 or do you want me to give this $10 to someone else? Which it's for me, it's all very yucky vibes. Yucky vibe.
I don't like that at all. We have another question that came in. Someone wrote, I have been nominated to create/lead my company's first ERG, but have no C-suite or male support /buy-in. How can I obtain it?
Okay, so here's the thing. I am a cynic again. Do not do more work for free. Do not do more work for free. ERGs, ERG leadership, ERG chairs should be paid roles because they are more work. Do not do more work for free. And do not run an ARG that does not have executive buy-in, because all it will be is like a trauma bonding session where you cannot change anything, but you can talk about what you're experiencing. And that is somehow worse. To have to talk about all the things that you experience without the power to change them is painful, it is hard, and it is heartbreaking, and no one should have to do that. Unfortunately, you can't convince leadership to do it unless they want to. That is a piece of this. And so you have to have buy-in, but it is not your job to coach them to get there.
Yeah. Somebody asked how much should ERG leaders be paid?
So I think it really depends on your industry and your vertical and the amount of work going into it. I really believe that it should be a like added to your salary kind of thing.
Not a bonus.
So it really depends on, again, what you're already making and the work you'll go in. I don't think there's like a flush number I could give you where it's like $10,000 because an ERG at Google is going to be very different than an ERG at, a smaller tech company.
I love that you mentioned that it should be in their salary. A lot of places pay it out as a bonus.
No, and bonuses are taxed grossly.
Yep.
So no, it should be a part of your pay, and there should be a payment contract the way there is with any other employee that says, this is a part of your salary until you offboard this position, whether it's because you've done your year of, chairmanship or you step down. It should be a piece of your salary until you relinquish the role.
I love that. I love that you mentioned it should be in the salary because I was thinking the same thing. Like you pay it out as a bonus. That's like tax 50% or not. I always in my head say it's 50. I think it's like 30, whatever. I don't know.
Feels like 50.
Yeah, it feels like 50. The game I play with bonuses is like, it's going to be taxed at 50. And then I'm pleasantly surprised when it's more. I know that's a child's game to play. I just admitted that to all these.
That's fine.
In my head, I'm like 50%. And then
we're all friends here.
Yeah, we're all friends here. ERGs are interesting. Like I saw the visceral reaction you had to like when I mentioned the ERG and you saying you're a cynic. Like, can ERGs be successful in an organization?
I think ERGs go back to the same thing that woman asked me on the plane. It is a place to build community, but communities have to be empowered, and like it costs money to do events, to host things, to bring people together in one room. And without that, then again, it just goes back to being like a trauma bonding session. And so I'm always so sad. I get reached out by ERGs a lot to speak. And a lot of times they're like, we have $12 and like a cheeseburger. Can you speak? Because they're not empowered. But I know these same companies are dropping $20,000, $50,000 on happy hours. And so why is it that you're not willing to drop that $20,000, $50,000 on actual people?
Yeah.
And that for me is just makes me so sad that companies are willing to spend all of the money on the frivolous stuff, but not on the stuff that could actually fundamentally change the direction of the culture of their organization.
It's something I just thought in my head. Marketing dollars are absurd at every company. It's like, why are they not allocating those marketing dollars to ERGs?
I had a company that spent $50,000, mind you. We were small. We were under 100 people. They spent $50,000 a month on lunch, and then another $7 per person per day for snacks. What could they have done if they just put that money, one, in our salaries? Like, I don't need you to buy me lunch. Please just pay me. But what if they took that same money and put it into community building? How would that look different in their organization? Because catered lunch doesn't build culture. Like the avocado and the hummus I can actually buy that on my own. I don't know if they're aware I'm available to go to the grocery store or Instacart. What I need to build community is empowerment.
Yeah. And
empowerment often takes financial budget.
Yeah. It makes me sad when ERGs don't have a budget. It's like, what are you supposed to do? The trauma bonding is very real. Moving on from ERGs, you mentioned the Black Speakers Collective. I'm not sure if everyone here knows what that is. Even if they follow you, they probably do. But do you want to tell us more about it?
So I started Black Speakers Collection about this time last year on accident, as like most of the things that I do as someone who has ADHD, and then I hyper focus. So I had made a post last year that was like, hey, it's December. So many people wait till January 30th to reach out for like a Black History Month speaker, despite the fact that it comes at the same time per year. It is not Easter. It is not Thanksgiving. Like, we don't have to guess when it's coming. It's at the same time. And so I made a post that was just like, hey, book your speakers beforehand. And then I gave a call to like, if you're a Black speaker, even if you're not talking about race and DEI, like drop your name, drop your topics, drop where people can find you. And it kind of like turned into this little like thing where I got a lot of engagement, and I was really pumped. I like put it in an Excel spreadsheet because I'm basically a dinosaur. And I was really excited. I had like 28 people, and I was like, yeah, look at me go. And someone was like, hey, I can like flip this into something like less archaic than a Google Excel spreadsheet. And he put it into something called Pori. And again, I was like pumped because I had 28 people. And he's like, how about you make it so people can sign up so you're not manually doing this? And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Fast forward to today, we have like 2,700 speakers, a community on Slack where, again, people kind of get to just exist without having to explain it or define it for anyone. And then we also have a LinkedIn audio series called The Clapback, where every week I basically feature Black speakers. And the concept is that clapping back on the idea that there are no Black speakers, I wish I could explain how many times when I ask a company why their DEI panel is just a bunch of white dudes or white women, and they're like, I couldn't find any Black speakers. And I'm like, did you look? Did you Google? Or did you just like connect people who you already knew so it was easy? Which the majority of people speaking and like getting booked on panels at conferences is just like a buttload of nepotism. So it's not really different than tech, I suppose.
And entertainment, as now I'm Nepo baby is a real thing that I learned about recently. Yep. I love that. And if somebody wants to get in touch to book a speaker, how would we do that?
So we have a website, which is blackspeakerscollection.com, and there's a very large database of Black speakers. And then we have a second one, which is Black Executives, which is for Black execs, because people are also under the impression that we don't exist. Yep. And then, of course, you can always reach out to me if you get really overwhelmed. I also offer the ability for me to like handpick your speakers for you. Obviously at a cost.
Yes, of course. For Black History Month, it is in 2 months. Again, it does not change. What could we as HR leaders, what type of programming do you think is like the most valuable that we could do for Black History Month?
Honestly, I would love to see the script flip to talk about Black empowerment instead of Black pain. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on the painful pieces of Black history without talking about, like, as a community, how powerful we are and how we have contributed to so many great pieces of culture, of technology, of history, instead of focusing on the things that are painful. Because although they are important to talk about, it is also so important to talk about how fucking great we are. And for me, that is like one of my favorite things to talk about is like Black women and Black femmes specifically. We are so, so powerful, and we have been a part of so many movements in this country. Let's talk about that.
I love that. So many people in the comments are saying, absolutely. Someone said sick of the trauma chat, agree, more Black joy. I think it's a great way to do Black History Month. Again, I'm still laughing in my head about the fact that people are confused that it still happens in February every year.
They do it with Pride too, though. And then the other thing I get during Pride is like, okay, well, make sure that we're talking about Pride and not Blackness. And I'm like, well, actually, let's talk about it. The intersectionality of Pride being a riot that was led by Black trans women. Or we forgot about that part. Obviously I teach everything through the lens of intersectionality. Yes. And even in Black History Month, I get a lot of people who are like, oh, well, don't talk about being queer. And I'm like, oh, but we're going to. Because it is so important that we get to shine a light on all of the pieces of ourselves and not just the pieces that society finds acceptable or that society finds that makes them comfortable. Because you can be Black, but not too Black, and you can be queer, but as long as you only like the pride stuff. Give me rainbows, not pain. And so I think it's really important that we teach all of this through the lens of intersectionality, because Blackness has been such an important piece of the structure and the foundation of this country, obviously, because it's literally built on our backs. Let's talk about how we have changed the culture of this country for good, instead of just focusing on the ways that we have been harmed.
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely the flip of pain to empowerment is an amazing one that I hope I can do something at Work Week around that lens too, because it is hard to constantly have trauma on display, but never be the folks that people are celebrating. And I think it's a big part of it too. It's like, it's Black History Month. We should be celebrating, not reflecting on all the ways we have harmed these people, like instead.
Well, and I think people forget, like, I mean, US history is like pretty dismal, abysmal to like begin with. Like, we don't do a great job. But Black history is like so much larger than slavery and civil rights. Like, it is much larger, much wider, much deeper than what we typically hit on. And I would love to see us spend more time really digging into a zoomed out version of what Black history and Black future looks like. I would really love to see us talk more about Black futures.
I love that. I'm going to put that in a note for even my own programming. And when people ask me like what I would do, I'm going to direct them to you, honestly, in the Black Speakers Collective. With that, we have about 10 minutes left. I think we're going to wrap up with like maybe one or two more questions. If anyone has them, drop them in the Slido for Madison. Some of the last things that I want to ask you a bit more about, like, thank you for joining us today. Two, we talked about Black history. We've talked about intersectionality, what companies can do. Is there ever a point where you were just like, I will not work with those people? And like, what are the signals that they give that make you say, no way, will not, I cannot help you?
Yes. So I actually who did I have this conversation with recently? I talk a lot about my boundaries as a speaker, as a facilitator. I also talk about the fact that like, I'm really honest when people have their first chat with me. I might not be the right person for you. I am very honest. I am not warm and fuzzy. Those are just not like the vibes I give. And that's okay if that's what you want. It's just not me. However, I'm also not going to not be exactly who I am. I recently, or I guess not recent anymore, because now 2020 was a long time ago, at a company in 2020. And this is at the point where I still wasn't very good at saying no.
Yeah.
And you might have read content back then that I talked about it. I talked about not being good at it. But I had a company who they had been like, okay, so we're going to do this DEI training, beep it up, doop. And we really want to focus on Blackness, but can you not talk about being queer? And I was like, no, actually. And I was like, first off, it would be weird because most of the people, if they see me and they see my content, they're going to know that I'm like
your literal t-shirt.
Yeah, my t-shirt on LinkedIn says
your t-shirt on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Like, come on now. And that was the first time that I realized that I was like, I'm going to say no to people who only want pieces of me, that want the like parts of me that make them feel comfortable. But obviously in this moment, the founder, I found out later, was like a hardcore evangelical and like was homophobic. And so he didn't want me to talk about being queer because he fundamentally believed it was wrong, which I'm not going to contribute to a culture that promotes that. And of course, you know, my gut instinct is always to want to help heal organizations, but I cannot help heal them if I'm also then contributing to this level of homophobia by hiding pieces of myself. I'm also getting better at saying no when people can't meet my rates. Someone had a conversation with me again back in 2020 where I was apt to be like, yeah, sure. Like, I want to work with you, so let's do it. And they told me, like, every time that you undercharge yourself, you basically set it up so that the next Black woman is underpaid. And so being in a world where like so much of the work I do is for Black women, Black femmes, and Black non-binary people, I do not want to live in a world where I am setting them up to be underpaid. I want everyone to secure the bag. I'm of the belief that someone is printing money somewhere in DC, like in a house, in a warehouse.
Truly, they are.
There is enough money for all of us to get our bag and get our fee. So I am of the belief that if you're down to drop $50,000 on a happy hour, but you're going to say you can't afford my fee, then we're just not going to work together, and that's fine.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely defining the no, I think, is really important. I feel like, honestly, like, we're just taught to say yes to a lot of things, and it's hard to say like, no, I will not do that, or no, I do not stand for that. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. We did no's. Anyone else with any last remaining questions? Somebody wrote, there sure is enough money for all of us. They're definitely printing money like 10 blocks for me right now.
I mean, if Elon Musk can go to space in a giant dick, I feel like you can pay my speaking fee.
That is the quote. Elon Musk go to space in a giant thing. You can play my Squeaky Baby. I'm dying. Everyone here is appreciating that. That was amazing. Madison, thank you so much for joining us today. I deeply appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're off to do greater things after this, but if anyone wants to get in touch with her, you can find her on LinkedIn. You can also get your speaker for Black History Month now from the Black Speakers Collective. With that, any last closing remarks? If you were to leave everyone here with one thing to walk away from today, what would it be?
So I think the thing that has brought me the most freedom has been learning that not everyone is going to like me, and being exactly who you are is going to come with a lot of rejection, a lot of no's, but there is so much power in calling yourself home, in owning your voice as exactly who you are and who you need to be. And you are not less than because you've experienced trauma. You are not less than because you hold a marginalized identity. Your marginalized identity, whatever it is a fucking gift. For me, being Black and being queer is a fucking gift. And that is not the barrier. White supremacy has always been the barrier. It is not you. And so please know that, again, there's power in coming home to yourself rather than trying to make a home out of people who never wanted us.
I love that so much. So many people in the comments are saying that is super powerful. Honestly, I feel so much pressure to explain my identity to people all the time. And I recently have been I'm not going to do this. I don't need to explain to you who I am and what I've experienced. So thank you so much for sharing that. You can follow her on social, Twitter, TikTok. Your TikTok's back, right? We got it back.
Yeah, I got permanently banned, but now I'm back. So now I have a backup too, but I still have my main back.
There you go. And then we got Glassdoor to fix that ridiculous situation, right?
Yes, I had to moderate their own platform. I was like, hi, your terms and service do not allow for diagnosis. And this random comment of someone who definitely didn't work for me called me a narcissist, which is not just a fun little adjective. That is a mental health condition. And they were like, oh, yeah, you're right. But I had already gone back and forth with this person 6 times who was like, no, this doesn't violate community standards. So I had to literally do her job. And then she deleted it. But let me know that they could edit it and put it back up if they wanted to.
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't trust any social platform, but really all of them have just disappointed me in the span of a week, as usual.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madison, for joining us for this fireside chat. I feel so honored that you took time out of your day to join us. Thank you again. You can follow her on all of that. And we are so grateful that you took time out of your day. Everybody else, I think everyone's going to blow up and say thank you in a second. Everybody else, thank you for joining us today as well. I have a fun survey you all can take to tell me if you liked this or if you didn't like this. Tyler's going to drop it in the chat right there. And then I have to say a final thank you to Questus and Newsstand, who give me the ability to have conversations with all my friends and elevate everyone I can. So thank you, Madison, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun. And if anyone needs anything, please know I'm always here to be a resource.
She is great. And her LinkedIn is truly I don't know if everyone knows, is Madison's truly a hero of mine. I was so creepy when I DM'd her. I was like, hi, you're a hero. And I was like, she doesn't know anything about me. And I'm DMing her, calling her a hero, like a creeper. So know that you can totally do that. And she will respond. So thank you so much, Madison, again. Bye all. Bye everyone. Have a great day.